Bonjour, David Barrault, je suis rédacteur en chef aux Échos, ravi de vous accueillir. I'm going to switch to English because one of the guests for the first session of this afternoon is Goli. Hi Goli, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Very good. We can't see you on the... We don't have a TV screen with your face, but if we can hear you, that's very good. I'm going to say a few words for the introduction for the afternoon in French, and then I will switch back to English. Merci beaucoup. Une bonne partie de ceux qui nous suivent sont aujourd'hui en ligne pour cette 7e édition de Médias en scène. Le programme de l'après-midi est hyper riche. On va parler à peu près de tous les secteurs de l'industrie des médias et de tous les enjeux à court et moyen terme qui rebattent les cartes dans cette industrie. On trouvait que c'était intéressant pour ouvrir les débats de nous plonger sur une expérience internationale d'un média qui a particulièrement réussi. Switching back to English. So, as I said, we thought it would be a good introduction for this afternoon of debate on the future of the media industry, to have the point of view of a media player which has been very successful. I'm going to say a few words about Politico, but then, Goli, I will let you introduce and tell us a little bit more about it. Politico was born in 2007. I was based in the US at that time, and I remember when it was launched in DC as a political newspaper with a print edition and already an online side. It was mainly a US media at the beginning, but it's now a global player in the media industry. It's very present in Brussels, and it has a strategy to trying to grow in Europe. And in a landscape of media where we've been writing about media who are suffering, who go bankrupt, who are having difficulties, we have to acknowledge that Politico is an amazing success. It was acquired, I don't know when exactly, but maybe last year or 2 years ago by Axel Springer. And the rumor was, I don't know if it was official, that it was for a value close to 1 billion. To talk about the success and the strategy of Politico, we have Goli, who is joining us live from DC, I think, or New York, in the US?
No, from Washington, D.C.
From Washington, D.C. She's been an executive in various media in the US, from radio to TV to newspapers, so an amazing background. And next to me is sitting Marion, who is the editor of the French edition of Politico. Goli, can you tell us first a few words about, I briefly introduced the story of Politico, but can you come back on what was maybe the vision of Politico when it was launched? You were not there at that time, but I'm sure that you've met the founders. So what was the idea, and why did you think that there was room in a very crowded space for a new type of information media?
Good afternoon. It's wonderful to be with all of you today, and I apologize that because of me you have to conduct this interview in English, but it's wonderful to be able to join you virtually. You gave a wonderful overview. I will say, we're about to celebrate our 18th birthday in just a few days. And, as you mentioned, we are unfortunately a rare publication in the sense that we have been very successful, and we've found a business model that allows us to support a large and growing newsroom. And to go back to your question of why Politico was started, I was not at Politico, but actually I was at the Washington Post in 2006 when John Harris and Jim Vandehei, the two founders of Politico, were both journalists at the Washington Post, and they announced that they were leaving to start this new publication. And I remember that day very clearly because it was a very big deal inside the company at the Washington Post. And I think what they uniquely realized is that, in 2007, we were also at another point of upheaval in our business. We were going through this technological disruption that had been created by the introduction of the internet and the World Wide Web as a platform. I think what they saw was that really the future, that for publications to be successful in the future, they would have to organize themselves around specialized coverage and really be very focused on what was being covered. And they also saw the opportunity to cover and really do journalism somewhat differently, and to have more voice and sort of speak with in a fresh way with the audience, rather than sort of, I would say, the more sort of dry form of coverage that was then traditional in newspapers.
How big and how extensive are you today? What is Politico today? It started in DC, but where are you today? How many editions? How big is the newsroom?
Sure. Yeah, so we started in 2007 in Washington, D.C. In 2015, we planted our flag in Brussels. And today we are 1,100 employees worldwide. We operate 7 newsrooms in 9 time zones. And the big expansion also has come in the last 2 years, of building a very large newsroom in Sacramento, in London, starting to build out our presence in Paris and Berlin and New York. And we're a much different publication than we were in 2007, when we were started here in Washington.
Marion, can you tell us a few words about Paris? When did it start and how big it is today in Paris?
Yes, of course. I was in Brussels when we decided to launch in Paris back in 2020. And I would say, as for for kind of geographical expansions, it was a mix of strategy and opportunity, right? The strategy was fairly logical, having established like a very strong footing in Brussels and at the heart of the European Union. It was fairly logical to start expanding in power centers in the national capitals. But then you kind of have to pick the right moment. And the moment in our case, in both London and Paris cases at least, was partly dictated by the news. In London, it was Brexit, which provided us with a huge momentum, because suddenly it became a huge competitive advantage to kind of know the European Union inside out and be able to cover the negotiations around Brexit from both sides of the channel. In Paris, it was a bit of the same, in the sense that back in 2020, obviously we knew that there was a presidential election around the corner, that it's usually a right time to launch some political journalism venture. And I'd say we had the right configuration also internally, with people ready to go on the front line and start this in Paris, which we did in early 2021. I'd say we kind of applies the same recipe in all of these places, but with local ingredients, kind of adapting to the market and our readers, but always in keeping with our vision and our mission. And to echo Goli's point, I think what is key to our success is we know who we are, right? We provide information to people who are politically interested in politics and policy. We're very focused in what we do. We go after exclusive information. We're not into commodity news. And I think this focus is really important for all the teams at Politico.
How many people in the newsroom today in Paris?
In Paris, we're at 27 journalists now.
27?
Yeah. From 5 when we started 5 years ago. Okay.
And the name of the publication is Politico, but does it mean that you cover only politics in the US, in Brussels, and in Paris?
Yes, so yes, I mean, I would say, Marion just talked about our recipe. I will say we actually really have been very consistent in our strategy from day one. And really part of our recipe has been our focus. We only cover politics, policy, and power. So really, as we say, our superpower is covering policy, and our coverage of politics is really, how politics is a means to make policy. And then we obviously cover the people and the personalities behind the policy making.
You want to add something about your coverage in Paris? Is it
Yeah,
from politics to policy? What's the...
Yeah, obviously that's, as we said, we're very focused on that. I would say, though, that we cover politics in a slightly broader sense than the traditional publications. As Goli said, it's all about politics, policy, and power. And that's been quite difficult to translate, actually, in France, because when we say politique in France, it can mean both policy and politics. But we cover both the politics in the kind of traditional sense of the term, but also kind of policy making, and then the kind of corridors of power. So everything that is kind of around politics and that shapes it to a large extent.
I'll come back to the business model in a second, but I'd like to, because Goli, you mentioned it, I think, about the fact the way you write, the way you cover. I read your newsletter in the morning. You also have a special style, in a sense. You don't write in the traditional way traditional newspapers and reporters used to write. You have a kind of there is a special politico style. Was it something that you do everywhere? Is it specific to France? Is it part of your signature in a sense?
Well, I will answer quickly, and then I'll let Marion. I will say it is very much a part of our signature, and I would say it really comes, again, John Harris, who was the founder of the publication, who is back as the editor-in-chief of the publication. He has a very clear vision of what he wants the sound and the voice of the publication to be. And I will say, I think our Paris playbook is, because of the supremely talented journalists that we have writing that newsletter, there is sort of a cleverness, a wit, and a sharpness to how we write that I think really engages the reader.
There's also a little bit of, you're not making fun, but you try to be funny and clever at the same time. You try not to be too arrogant or too... you're not insulting the people you write about, but you try to have you try to have some côté piquant, we would say in French.
Yeah, it's very much part of our identity everywhere. Obviously, it can be slightly different depending on where, but I remember, I think it's something that John Harris used to say when he started Politico. It was partly because it was kind of bored reading the press, but he still loved to listen to political journalists at the coffee machine, kind of telling anecdotes and stories unfiltered. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to kind of lift the curtain a bit on the kind of, the behind the scenes of politics. Do it in a way that we also entertain readers. We're not afraid of that word. And I think that was a big question when we started in Paris, because we had never done this in a language other than English before, and whether we would be able to kind of keep that identity, adapt that style, without compromising on the substance and the kind of seriousness and accuracy, and also be recognized for that. And we were very happy that we did, and that a lot of our readers read us because they need to, because they will miss out if they don't, but also because they truly enjoy it. And it's
fun to read, it's true.
And it's fun to write too.
It's fun to write. Goli, let me move on to the business side. As I remember at the beginning, it started with a print and online, and the print was free. It was maybe a way to build notoriety, to make yourself known, and it was a bit to build an audience, and then revenues would be coming from somewhere else. What is the business strategy today? Is it still a little bit what I just said, or has it evolved? Do you still have print? What's the business strategy today?
Yeah, I would say, we are very much a digital news organization. I think the print publication, even from the day we began, was really a limited circulation. So I think we published something around 10 or 15,000 copies every day, and really we would distribute it on Capitol Hill for the staff and the members of Congress to be able to read and engage with a print product. Today, there was one big shift in our business model, and that was in 2011. We launched a subscription service. So we launched a subscription service really targeted at public affairs professionals. So, I think part of the success of our business is that even though we have 20 million plus readers that come to our publication every month, we, as Marion said in the beginning, we write for a very small, influential group of readers, and we generate the majority of our revenue from a subscription service that is really a professional service for people in public affairs teams at Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 1000 companies, and for people that are actually policymakers and the staff of the policymakers.
So everywhere you have a free product, like you have Playbook in Paris or in Brussels or in the US, and then you have vertical and specialized newsletter or services that you sell through subscriptions?
Exactly, yes. So we have, in the US, for example, we cover 17 policy verticals. In the EU, I believe we cover around 12. And for example, last year we launched our first verticals in France. So now we have 2 policy verticals in France, and we will continue to build on that in the coming years.
So what you call verticals would be there would be one on the energy, one on telecommunication, infrastructure, and stuff like that.
Yes, exactly. So in France we've launched a technology vertical and an energy and climate vertical, which Marion can talk more about. But yes, we sort of cover everything from defense to agriculture to financial services to health policy. So all of the major policy areas that we really organize ourselves the way the legislatures organize themselves.
Mm-hmm. And those products are very expensive or a fair price, but how costly is it to be a subscriber to one of those verticals?
Yeah, again, I would say this is again the success of our business is because we are a work tool. On average, you will pay, depending on which market. Obviously, we price according to the market. But in the U.S., for example, the average subscription is around $20,000.
$20,000 per year for one vertical. So if I need more, it's a little bit more expensive.
It's a little more it's a little more complicated than that. You get sort of you get options of what you want to cover, but you buy by sort of the number of seats and licenses. Okay. It is we're a news information service really. So you are subscribing to a news information service and you choose which verticals you want to subscribe to, and your price changes according to that.
Mm-hmm. But in a sense, you compete more with the Bloomberg of this world than with the Les Echos or the Wall Street Journal, in a sense.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And you also organize conferences, big events. Is it part of your business strategy to be something more than print or word media?
So yeah, but we actually really view our events as an extension of our journalism in the sense that it's another way. We see ourselves as conveners as well, that really convening the right group of people to have a conversation. For example, this morning we are convening a group here in Washington, D.C., really to talk about the first 100 days of the new administration. So we're going to have everybody from, House Speaker Mike Johnson there to senators and congressmen to really talk about the new administration. So we actually see it very much a part of our both our distribution strategy of really getting our brand and our work out into the world, but also really an extension in the sense that bringing people together to have thoughtful conversations about the most important topics of the day and doing it in person is critical also, we feel, to the success of the publication.
Moving to France, Marion, you've been here for not 5 years, but this is your 5th year in Paris. You've built one vertical. What's the potential of the French market, and what will be your strategy for this specific market, and the first time that you publish news in non-English?
Yeah. To just have like a slightly more holistic picture of what we do here, like typically we do actually 5 things. Like we have, so Playbook is our flagship political newsletter, the one we have in every capital. We have one in Paris. We have a news service in English, like we cover France for a global audience who wants to know about politics everywhere. And we have a total of 3 subscription services, like 2 verticals and also another one which is called Paris in French, which covers lobbying. And our strategy going forward is really to kind of keep moving on these 2 legs, right? Like covering politics for a sophisticated audience, free, like in our newsletters, and also events, like we do, and then keep growing, our pro services or subscription service, which is used by professionals, because we want to feed our strategy on both fronts. And I think on the events business particularly, there is still huge potential. Every time we do an event in Brussels with people who come from Paris, from everywhere, they tell us the quality of event I can find here, the quality of the audience, of the people I can talk to at this event is unique. Mm-hmm. And the kind of people we're able to blend as well. Our events usually mix decision makers from the business world and from politics. We have this capacity to really connect the two, which I think is very valued by people we're trying to reach.
Paris is a big city, but is the market really big to have maybe one day between 5 or maybe 10 verticals, or is it too small actually to build something that big? Yeah.
I mean, it's a good question. I would say as long as we succeed, we'll keep pushing. Right now, we're very happy about like the way we've taken off on energy and tech, which are 2 big structural issues, shaping the economy, shaping politics to a large degree. We want to be successful where we do things, so we're not reckless either. Right.
I have a few more questions I want to ask about Politico, but I'm afraid that we will run out of time. So I'm going to ask you a few questions about the state of mind in DC today, Goli. I'm happy to have you, and we are just a few days away from the inauguration of the second Trump season 2. How is the media? We've seen in the Silicon Valley, we've seen that big tech companies have a different attitude when it comes to Trump now that maybe it was for the first mandate. How is the media landscape reacting to this coming of a second version of Trump? Do you think that it's going to have an impact on the media industry this time?
Well, I think that, you mean in terms of from a positive like the way that it really positively impacted the media business?
Positive or negatively? What is the arrival of second Trump is going to have an impact on the media landscape in the US? It was a very good news for the New York Times the first time. Yeah. Subscription went up, but at the same time, there's all this debate about platforms and speech and freedom of speech and all that. So.
Well, look, I think the way we look at it is that, from the time that we started the publication, our focus has really been, and it is still today, to present the news fairly. And to us, this new administration, this is a very important political story, not just here in Washington, but around the world. And I think the fact that we now have a much larger geographic footprint, I think will allow us to cover the story even better than we have in the past. And so, I think the other thing that for us is really, really critical is, one of our principles and one of the reasons we've been very successful is that we have always taken a nonpartisan approach to our journalism. And it really is because as a professional service, and a service that people are paying for considerably, that we have to make sure that we're covering policy without any sort of ideology or advocacy. And so, I think for us, this is just a very interesting political story and a very interesting moment in time. And that is really how we are approaching, the change in administration.
It's possible to be neither Democrat nor Republican. It's possible you don't, because historically in the newspaper in the US there used to be this quite separation between news and comments, but does it mean that you have no comments when it comes to political? Because you don't want...
We have not, since our inception, actually. It was a decision that John and Jim made at the very beginning, is that we've never had an opinion section. We do publish commentary from outside sources, but we do not take a position and never have, as a publication. And really it is because of our business model, we think that it's critical for us to fairly cover Republican or Democrat. We really do try to just tell our readers what is going on and where the world is going.
Marion, is it possible to do the same in Paris? Because in Paris, all the media more or less have a political etiquette. You know when you read something what it stands for.
Yes, it is. I mean, we do this every day. I was the first question people asked me when we started, and they still do, is what's your ligne editoriale? Like what's your line? And I'm like, we don't really do that. Like we don't have an editorial, as Goli said. Like we are trying to cover the news fairly, to talk to every side, like for every of the stories, and that's also why people rely on us. They know that we don't have like an ideological agenda. And we talk to all kinds of sources, and sources come to us because they know that we will present the news fairly as well.
I mentioned during my introduction that the group was acquired by Axel Springer. I forgot when it was, but maybe a year or 2 years ago.
2021.
Okay, I got my figure wrong, sorry. What has it changed, and what might it change in the near future? We have just 1 minute, but
Sure.
What is it going to allow you to do in the near term?
So I think what it has allowed us to do, in the last 3 years since they acquired us, is actually the big investment that we've made. When we started, if you go back 3 years, we had maybe a dozen reporters in London. We had a handful of reporters in Paris. Today we have about 35 reporters in London, 27 in Paris, 20 in Berlin, nearly 25 in Sacramento. So that investment in journalism is really a result of Axel Springer wanting to invest in independent journalism. So I think that is what they have given us the ability to do. We are a profitable and a very profitable publication, so we can self-fund this investment, but they are very much supportive of us doing that. I think the other thing to really note about Axel Springer is that they really, the brands within the portfolio really have editorial and commercial independence. Mm-hmm. So it's something that when I came on board 3 years ago, they said to me, we hire a management team, we allow the management team to run the business, and in my 3 years, that is exactly what they have done.
Goli, thank you very much and for taking the time from DC to join us. Marion, merci beaucoup. I know that you have a very busy day today.
Merci.
You have to go to the Assemblée Nationale where there's a discours de politique générale, so it's a very busy day. We appreciate very much that you took the time to join us today. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.